Alright, this is a release video to go over some features for the Atlas project. This is my 2.0 major release. I want to step through the various features, highlight a couple things, and go over a couple things. So I will be doing this via the web version. You can find all the various information on the GitHub repository. Let me grab the web version here, back that up to here. So, version 2.0. Oh, we have a couple fun things going on. Super trippy, super excited. So let me walk you through a couple things. The features that I'm going to walk you through are the same between the standalone Electron version and the web version, except for one new feature, which I will address at the end of the video. So the first thing that I wanted to note is I've added a right-click context menu. Depending on what your mouse is hovering over. So if you hover an empty space and you right click, you get this option to reset default points. This is if, for instance, if I hop in my waypoints and I accidentally delete a bunch of the origin stations and I'm like, oh shucks, I think I wanted those origin stations. I can right click, I can reset the default points, and this will import the default stations back in. 28 were skipped because we still had a bunch of them floating around. Just kind of a reset for those default data, just in case you accidentally messed something up and you're like, oh, I want this back. If you right click on a point or on an object, for instance, we have EOS floating way over here, or if I right click on a point, you get a copy coordinate option. If you click this, you get your coordinate has been copied. Allow me to grab this guy over here. Now, the copy and paste, I'll get to paste in a second, format that I'm using is like this. So it's your X, comma, Y, comma, Z, with no spaces, no brackets. So you'll note, right, put that guy over there for now. I can hop in here. I can grab my north, right? It's 20,000, 0, 65,000. I can copy that coordinate. I can bring it over here. Boom, easy peasy. This copying, it's nice if you want to copy a point out to then send to a friend or something along those lines. This context menu I plan on expanding in the future. So in the future, I want to be able to do things like right-click and hide a point, right-click and delete a point, maybe right-click and add a point. I don't know how that would look, but I expect more options to show up in these context menus as I come up with them. Copying a point to your clipboard and the copy format right now has a use on our left bar here, right above controls. We got our controls. We have chord conversion. This is a small little widget that pops out and just kind of lives hovering there at the top left corner of the screen. The idea behind this is you can select a coordinate grid type and then convert between them. Currently, as you can see, I only support IPS to ISIN back and forth conversions. If I go IPS, it flips to ISIN there, as you would expect. In the future, I want to add a signatrope, though the math behind that's kind of befuddling me at the moment. And if I find any other coordinate systems, or if you have your own coordinate system and you would like me to add it in here, then that's something I want to be able to do. But each one of these sections has some buttons to it. They've got copy, there's a paste, and then there's a clear. So, for instance, in our situation, ISAN 000 is equivalent to this for IPS, right? And that matches down here. All the coordinates you see hovering over waypoints are IPS. So the only place you will see non-IPS coordinates is in this conversion dialog at the moment. But you'll note, right, our ISIN origin here matches the IPS coordinate for the ISIN 00. And if I change this guy, right, if I go 10,000, you'll note that it updates accordingly. You can scroll to kind of tweak these guys as you would expect. Now, what I can also do is I could be, hey, I want to know what the ISAN coordinate for origin station 18 is. So I can copy that coordinate. I can go over here to my IPS and I can paste it. I've got to allow that guy. If you see something like this, you have to hit allow. and it'll paste it in, and that will update accordingly. You can update either side of this box. It's not just in and out, right? I can tweak that guy. Oh, it doesn't update. That's interesting. Ah, a bug. Fantastic. That will be fixed. I want to make it bidirectional. So in this case, I'll flip this over to IPS, paste that guy in there, and you'll see that it updates with the ISAN coordinate as you would expect. Eventually, I want that to be bidirectional. In addition, these two buttons at the top just link to the relevant repositories. So if you have IPS selected here, this will open you to the IPS one. And then if you hit this guy, this will open you to the ISAN repository. Just if I end up having like 5 different coordinate systems and people are like, what are those? I'd like to be able to redirect people there. And then of course you can hit the clear and it just kind of resets everything back to its default. And then you can also go in here and I can be like, oh, well, if I had a 20,000 IPS and like a negative 16,000 0, right? You can also copy that ISAN coordinate and that will copy the coordinate as you expect to your clipboard in ISAN format. Very handy. So those buttons are all functional, and that's a toggle on and off. Regarding coordinates, just a side note, this isn't really a feature, just for anyone that is curious about how this works. Another thing that I did with 2.0 is in previous versions, coordinates were 1-to-1, right? So when I come over here, and I'm like, hey, my north is 20,000, 0, 65,000. In this 3-dimensional space we have here, that was the actual physical coordinate that was being rendered. And I talked with a few people, and I was running into object rendering problems because that made objects very, very, very large, right? Technically speaking, this was practically 1-to-1 size-wise from the actual Starbase universe, which is a little ridiculous. So in the background, I scale all these coordinates down. So the background data management is all scaled down. So 20,000 is equivalent to 2. 65,000 is equivalent to 6.5. And that's purely for object rendering. You will see no impact of that in the UI. Those numbers should never be visible in JSON files or anything. Everything is artificially scaled up to match what you see in game. But as a side note, the background math scales everything down just for math's sake. In addition, with that change, we did some adjusting to panning speed. I tweaked it a little bit. The default value is 100, and this can go all the way up to a maximum of 3,000, and we have a reset pan speed button, which sets us back to 100, because the pan speed had to be fixed, because now in addition to EOS, I have taken the liberty of adding the other various planets in the solar system. This is primarily based on the fantastic map created by Epic Corp and Rabir. Fantastic map. I was able to sit down and take their image and pretty much deduce the coordinates based on angles and distances and shenanigans to match as best I could. Because of that, 90% of what you see here, all these various planets out here, we have Astel, that guy way out there is Iris, right? All these estimated coordinates that you see are estimated. We also don't necessarily have... I don't have an in-game system that I can use to measure angles yet, so they all lie on the same flat plane. You can disable the grid and make things a little cleaner. They all lie on the same flat plane. I've added the various orbit rings and everything. And then you also notice that these gates scale up, which I'll note in just a second. But I thought it was cool to have everything. The planet sizes and ring sizes that you see, right, are currently all based on Elysium. The only planet that should be the correct size is Elysium. The size of this guy with the belt and everything, this should be accurate, thanks to measurements taken by a couple people that sent me measurements. Epic Corp, in addition to someone else that sat down and did some fine-tuned measuring from the core of the planet out. Very useful, 10 out of 10. That's the only planet that's accurate. All the other planets are just copy-pastes of that size as people explore and find new things. And if you have any size measurements regarding the diameter of the various moons, or the height, or the width, or the diameters of the belts, send them to me, because as we explore, this would be super fun. We can update this as we go. bring it back here. This is why that reset pan is very nice to have. You'll note at the bottom right-hand corner that with all of these additions, FPS is still nice and stable, capped at 60 frames per second. I am recording using OBS right now in addition to all of this. Theoretically, if you have like hundreds upon hundreds of waypoints, maybe you'll have a performance hit, but I would be very surprised if you did. And if you do have any performance hits, make sure that hardware acceleration is enabled in your browser. This was a bug that I discovered while talking back and forth with the star map developers, that in order, when you don't have hardware acceleration enabled in your browser, what happens is all of this 3D rendering is shunted onto your CPU, which just clogs it all down. So if you tick on that hardware acceleration, then this kind of rendering is booted out to your graphics card, which is, you know, much better for rendering these kinds of things. So if you're having FPS problems, make sure that option is set. And now the last feature, which is web version specific, is that the website version of Atlas will now leverage local storage in order to persist your waypoint changes. Now, what does this mean? Practically, this means I can go in here. Let's grab our waypoints. I'm going to make a... What am I going to do? I'm going to use flying saucer. This is going to be our test waypoint in our test group. We're going to stick it like, I don't know, 10,000, 5,000, 5,000, right? Let's make it like a nice, let's go with like a purple color. So we're going to add that guy in, right? So we got our test point down here. You can view that test point. There it is. It's right there. It's living kind of floating out right there. Now, when I do a browser refresh, or I close the browser, I could reset my whole browser if I wanted to, and I navigate back into this, that is saved. It's still there. In previous versions of the website, you would have to hop into your import dialog here, and you'd have to load a JSON file. Now what's happening is whenever a waypoint changes, it is taking all the waypoint information and saving it to the local storage of your browser. Now, local storage, for those of you not familiar, is browser functionality. You have it all over the place. You have it on Firefox and Chrome and Safari. And local storage is essentially a local SQLite database stored on your computer in your files. For Chrome, it lives in your user profile folder. It's on your hard disk. And it's a small little database of just local information that is stored for various things. And you can actually view it. If you ever want to poke around, or if you ever want to learn more, Google's a great source. But I can hit Control-Shift-I, and I get what is called the Chrome Developer Tools. Now, in our Chrome Developer Tools, I can go to my Application tab, and on our left here, I've got local storage. And for local storage, it loads up this website that I have, right? And you'll note that here I have a key, Atlas Waypoints, and here's all the JSON information about the currently loaded points. At the bottom, this guy, right? There's our test, our ship4, with a custom color. You'll note the position is a little tweaked because local storage, these are the background numbers, right? The scaled down ones that you'll note. That's why it's a 1, 0.5, 0.5. You'll never see these numbers, but in local storage, they exist for data management purposes. But this local storage is a physical file on my computer. It's not saved anywhere else. It's on your machine, which is 10 out of 10. So that's great. It means that you don't necessarily have to constantly be exporting or resaving your stuff whenever you do things. Now, if your local storage gets purged or you want to import things, you'll still have to go through the import waypoints dialog, but this guy is going to be much more useful for sharing points between other users, right? For your local storage, your changes should remain saved as you update and tweak the map as you see fit. Though, just in case things get buggy, who knows, it's always a good idea to go ahead and click Save Waypoints and grab a JSON version of your stuff just as a backup, you know? Otherwise, that is the end of the new features for version 2.0. You can feel free to end the video here. I do want to sit down and take a couple minutes to address some concerns that some people had when I released it the first time around. When I first released Atlas, it was just as a standalone Electron executable, which is still available. Some people expressed concerns with that running an executable is, a little spooky for some people, which I totally get. So I booted up the web version of it. And then there were some concerns about how, even as a web version, people would not input their coordinates into any third-party service because they could be stolen, etc., etc. So I just wanted to take a couple minutes to reiterate for anyone who might be concerned or curious. Atlas, what you see here in front of you, has no backend. It communicates with no external services, other than a few that I'll show you in a second. There's no network activity that would send your information or steal your information or grab information from other people. It is all local. It is built this way because it was originally made as an Electron application, and I wanted it to be local. The web version shares those attributes. Not only can you look at the source code, but in our trusty developer tools, there is a network tab. This network tab, for those of you unfamiliar, pretty much lists all network activity. If your web browser, it loads the website, and it logs all network activity. Whether it's asking for information, grabbing files, anything that your browser reaches out to is logged here. So what I can do is I can do a refresh. You know that we have some network activity. Most of this stuff, none of this stuff reaches out to anything spooky. And I'm going to do a quick walkthrough for those people that are still super spooked, and I'm going to explain to you what you're seeing. And for those that might find this educational, 10 out of 10. The very top one here, this is where we're grabbing. This is a GET request, right? This is one of the few and potentially only major GET requests you'll get. This is merely going to GitHub and asking for the web page. From there, we get the JavaScript file that runs all of the rendering. All this functionality runs on JavaScript. So that's what that file is, along with some chunk vendors, the intercept bundle, and the hook. This is all JavaScript stuff that is compiled when I compile the program and I host it as a web server. That's all things that are there. We have some CSS here, some more JavaScript. We reach out to material design icons, right? We go to a CDN JS deliver. This is a font for icons, right? So all these icons you see on the left, a save icon, or a little import icon, the refresh icon, the GitHub icon at the bottom, all of those come from material design, 10 out of 10. We grab some fonts here, right? Because I, got some fonts to display. And then we have images. You can actually see, right? Here's the logo that's displayed at the top left. That's the Stargate icon that's rendered on the map, right? We got the ISAN icon for the ISAN waypoint, right? And then the various other, the various other icons, along with an icon that's just kind of left over from Electron stuff. Now, as you sit down, right? If I hop in here to a waypoint and I open this up, you'll notice that we got some more PNGs, right? And these are all, the various icons that are being used. These are all, what other data image one, right? If I open this guy, I'm going to get a lot more PNGs to show all this list, right? Here are all the various PNGs and all the various icons you can potentially choose. If I hop in here and I make a test2, right? And I add this guy, you'll note that there's nothing happening when there's nothing below this PNG. So there's no network activity. That's the best I can say. You can hop in this, you can mess with it yourself. There are some great filters at the top that will show you things like WebSockets and XHR requests and everything like that. The program has no backend and communicates with no external services. I can 100% guarantee that any information you put into the site does not leave your computer. The only places it is saved is locally in local storage on your machine or in JSON files that you export. There is no information being transmitted. If you're still unsure, I would love to sit down and have a conversation. My real hope is that as Starbase develops as the game, this becomes useful to people. And if there are concerns regarding security, I want to make sure those are addressed because it's important to me. Yeah. So that's pretty much it. Feel free to leave any comments or poke me on Discord. I actually have a proper Discord. You can find it. If you go to the Atlas repository, I have a little button here to click the Discord server. I have a link to the Discord server here. It's kind of a central Discord server for Atlas and IPS specifically. That if you need any tech support or if you have any ideas, feel free to come hang out, chill. Tell me how crazy I am. I don't know. And yeah, hopefully you will find this useful, potentially educational, and we'll keep up to date as I continue developing this sick little tool.